Good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Good afternoon, maybe for some. Uh, shall we just get started then? All right. So, welcome back, or I do see some new names. So, welcome back or welcome for the first time. Wherever you might be, I'm very happy to be continuing this series on Dharma for Difficult Times. Thank you again, all of you who are attending live, all of you who will maybe watch this on YouTube later. Thank you to Jella and all of the other people involved in putting these teachings together from Tibetan Buddhism. So let's just get started, okay? At the beginning, we always adjust our motivation to think that the purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings. And therefore, in order that I can benefit all sentient beings in the best way, I must first achieve the state of enlightenment. Then and only then will I have all of the skills, qualities, knowledge to guide sentient beings most effectively from the oceans of samsaric suffering to the state of enlightenment. And therefore, I'm going to engage now in this Dharma teaching so I can learn about all the tools, techniques, trainings in order to achieve the state of enlightenment. Okay? So that is why we're doing what we're doing. Okay? So let me just jump in here. Got some slides. And I'll say, those of you who have been attending the previous weeks, this week we have a lot of material on tap, okay? So let's just jump into it. We can do these preliminary prayers. Last week I did a bit of commentary on this, so this week we don't have to, but please, as we recite these, then try to generate in your mind the associated sort of feeling with it. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha-Dharma, the Supreme Assembly, by my collections of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha-Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my collections of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha-Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my collections of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay, so now let's just do a quick review of what we had started to cover before. So we were talking about this genre of teaching called the Lamrim, or the stages of path to enlightenment. And we said that then in the Lamrim, it basically arranges all of the Buddhist teachings in order of practice from our state as beginners all the way to full enlightenment. But then we can categorize those various teachings into three, um, the practices associated with three types of person who are then distinguished by their goals for their spiritual practice. And then because they have different goals, they need different methods or different practices to attain them. So we have the person of small capacity who wish to achieve a good rebirth in the next life. And then their main practice is to abandon non-virtue, which is the cause of the lower realms. And then, well, in our two sessions thus far, we have covered the practices of the person of small capacity. Excuse me. So now, in this session, you think we can do it? We're going to try to go for the person of medium capacity as well as the person of great capacity. Okay? Let's try. So the person of medium capacity, their goal is to achieve liberation from all of samsara, all of samsaric existence, And then they inquire as to what causes rebirth in samsara. They see it's the karma and afflictions, and therefore they set out to abandon those causes. Then we have the person of great capacity, and this person, they then desire not just liberation from samsara for themselves, but they desire full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And how they do that is, well, main thing, they will practice this mind of bodhicitta, this altruistic wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And then they'll engage in the so-called six perfections, uh, basically the attaining the causes for enlightenment. So we have the practice of generosity, ethical discipline, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, meditation, and wisdom. Okay. So now we're going to go into the practices of medium scope. And within that context, then this mind of renunciation comes up, but we'll describe how that is a bit of a difficult uh, translation. So sometimes we'll instead say, right, the mind yearning for liberation. Okay. So in Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects of the path, he says, without the complete intention, definitely to be free from circling. Okay, so here, circling, okay, we have the Sanskrit word samsara, right? Now, in Tibetan, sometimes you'll see korwa, korwa. And korwa has a connotation of like a circle or, yeah, a cycle, a wheel, right? Um, And then sometimes you'll see, sipa. Sipa is existence. Sipa korwa you'll often see. That will be like cyclic existence. But here, yeah, that is what samsara is. It is this cycle of existence. In other words, a uncontrolled cycle of rebirth due to our karma and afflictions. Okay? All right. But here we just see circling because I think in the Tibetan it just says korwa. Okay. So without the complete intention definitely to be free from circling, there is no way to pacify attachment seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. All right. So here, uh, Uh, there's no way to pacify attachment seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Okay, so who does that? Okay, the person of small capacity, they want a good rebirth in their next life. Okay, but this good rebirth in their next life still is in samsara. Okay, so unless and until we have the intention definitely to be free of all of samsara, then we'll still be seeking pleasurable effects within samsara, right? So you can think of it this way. That person of small capacity, they want to be free from only the suffering of the lower realms. You see, they have, yeah, the intention to be free from lower realms, but they just then want rebirth in the higher realms. Okay, so this next line, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. So even these ones who just merely want to attain a good rebirth in the next life, that thought itself binds them within samsara. You see? So Aryadeva says that the wise fear rebirth in the higher realms just as much as rebirth in the lower realms. Why? Because, well, let's take this practitioner of small capacity. they will, strive to get reborn in the higher realms. But even if they're successful in that practice, they will get rebirth in the higher realms, but that is only, their next life. So then the question is, what about the life after that? Right? So although they get rebirth in the higher realms, eventually that karma will run out, right? So unlike, say, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, if you're born in heaven, that's it. It's stable, and you're that way for eternity. Also, by the way, the hell realms is also the same. Uh, Once you're born in hell, that's it, right? So here in the Buddhist context, yes, there are kind of, we could say, heavenly realms, yeah, as well as the hell realms, but those are just effects of individual karma, and eventually when that karma runs out, well, the good news is someone in lower realms or even in the hells, that karma will eventually finish and they'll again be reborn in the higher realms. But those in the higher realms, well, that karma too will finish and then they'll be reborn in the lower realms again. That's why there's a statement in the Sangata Sutra that says, those who fear the realms of hell should not desire rebirth in the heavens. You understand? Why? Because even if they're born in heaven, they will then fall to the hells eventually. So the only solution to never be reborn in the hells again is to achieve liberation from samsara, to not be reborn within cyclic existence at all, right? So because of these reasons, then Lama Tsongkhapa at the very beginning seek renunciation. And here is what we're saying. So this mind of renunciation, you see, uh, so I was raised Catholic, right? And we have Lent, the 40 days before Easter, right? So Lent begins on Ash Wednesday, right? And during Lent, people often, they might give up chocolate, they might give up meat, they might give up something, right? But what that means, what happens before Ash Wednesday? Mardi Gras, right? Or if you're in Brazil, Carnival, right? Okay, so it's a huge party, all kinds of yeah, samsaric pleasures, right? And the point is, because you're going to give these things up on Ash Wednesday, then on Tuesday, or maybe even starts the weekend before, then you're going to party and sort of get your fill in, right? Mhm. So the point is here, that kind of mind, right? Then during Lent, you renounce those things, right? But you still think they're good, right? You still like them, right? And that's why you have them on Mardi Gras. That's why you party and get your fill in, because you still think they're good. Yet, for a kind of spiritual goal, you will renounce for 40 days, right? Okay. So here, it's not like that. This mind of renunciation, it can kind of give that connotation that that thing is still good. You still like it, but you're going to deny yourself because you're achieving a higher spiritual goal, right? Here, it's not like that. Here, we have to come to see that those samsaric pleasures actually are not uh, pleasant at all. We don't want them at all, right? And therefore, here in the title, we say developing the mind yearning for liberation. So the Tibetan word is actually ne jung, ne jung, ne jung. And so ne has the connotation of definite, and jung means to emerge. So the kind of mind that we want to cultivate is a mind thinking that no matter what it takes, I definitely have to emerge from samsara. You understand? Okay. So at the very beginning, seek renunciation means seek this mind that thinks I definitely have to get out of samsara no matter what it takes. Okay. Oops. And that is why then, in the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching of the Buddha, the first of the first was the truth of suffering. Okay, because until we understand um, the depth and the variety of suffering experiences that we actually have, well, then developing this mind of definitely to be free from that is going to be very difficult, you know. And oftentimes, even when we talk about our life, we might understand that we are suffering to a certain extent, but when you ask people, they'll say, "Oh, well, I'm suffering because my boyfriend left me. I'm suffering because I'm in debt. I'm suffering because I lost my job. I'm suffering because my boss is giving me a hard time." Whatever it might be, it never goes deep enough, right? It never goes deep enough. We are fundamentally suffering because we have this type of body and mind that is completely under the control of our afflictive emotions as well as karma. And as long as we're in that kind of situation, uncontrollably, we're going to experience one kind of suffering or another. Okay. So then in the Four Noble Truths, we have the truth of suffering. And that is coming first because the Buddha then tries to, you know, skillfully wake us up from the kind of infatuation and, yeah, preoccupation with samsaric pleasures. Then we have number two, the truth of the cause of suffering. Well, why are we in this state? It's because of karma and afflictions. Okay. Then three, the truth of the cessation of suffering means basically we have a possibility to be free of these samsaric sufferings forever, right? And for the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, well, that is the means, the method to be free of suffering. So here there's a very nice medical analogy from the Uttara Tantra by Maitreya, Gyu Lama in Tibetan, saying that recognize you're ill, eliminate the cause of the illness, attain health, rely on a remedy. Hmm? So yeah, when we go in to see a doctor, the doctor doesn't just first cut us open and perform some surgery. First, there's a diagnosis, right? And the various, medical tests, they might draw blood or sampling this or that, might do some x-rays or MRIs to really understand, um, you know, what it is that is ailing us, right? Then, let's say it's some kind of disease from a virus, then they'll be able to say, oh, you are ill, yes, and it is because of this virus, right? And then, but don't worry, there's a way to get rid of the virus, right? Through taking this medicine. And then they'll prescribe the medicine, right? Yes. So similarly, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively. Hmm. So that is showing the order of why the Four Noble Truths was presented in this way. Okay. And so this first one, that's actually the most important for us. Recognizing that you are ill means recognizing the extent and depth of which we are actually suffering. So I might have said this to you guys in the last lecture series, but I'm in Nepal right now at Kopan Monastery. And before I came here, I was doing a retreat in Dharamsala. And at that time, I was reading a lot of teachings from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And in one of them, I had read it before, but it kind of slipped my mind. Uh, anyway, he said, it's very interesting. He said he doesn't think that his students meditate on the suffering of samsara very much. You understand? he didn't think that his students, that means us, meditated on the suffering of samsara very much. Mm. So it's kind of true, right? Many times when we come into the practice, right, we're trying to get good vibes. Right? I want peace. Right? So the things like, loving kindness, compassion, okay, very nice. Or like, mindfulness of the breath, where we can just kind of meditate and sort of not think about our problems for a while. That's also very nice. But this one, the suffering, suffering, we have the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering. Oh, it's kind of not that nice to think about, right? So anyway, that kind of advice was to me, and thereby to all of us, a little subtle reminder that you know, as we'll see later, Shantideva says, if they haven't generated this mind in relation to themselves, how could they generate the mind in relation to others? Meaning the mind to be free of all samsaric suffering. Okay. So what that means is even a bodhisattva or someone who's wishing to go into the great scope, if they haven't first generated the mind thinking, I need to be free of all samsaric suffering, then how can they relate it or generate it in relation to other? How could they then say, may all beings be free from samsara? May all beings be free from suffering. So here, although we might be, you know, a little bit mm, interested more in the Mahayana path and generating this thought, may all beings be free from suffering, the more we're able to understand these various levels and kinds of suffering that sentient beings experience, well, then our compassion for others will also be that much more deep and profound. Okay? Oops. Okay. So that is now why we're going to reflect on these different kinds of suffering. And so here, just to go through it quickly, we have the 6 types of suffering. Here, I'm taking this translation from Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, where they use a little bit uncommon word in English, right? The bane of uncertainty. Okay. So normally, yeah, the only context I had heard bane before is the bane of my existence, right? Anyway, uh, it means the faults, the problems, right? So in general, as long as we're in samsara, we are constantly experiencing this bane of uncertainty. And that means, things are constantly changing. And even the things that had previously been sources of happiness and joy for us will eventually, change. And, well, they'll even, no longer bring the source of happiness that they once did. So we can think about that in terms of, you know, uh, people and relationships, how many, we might have thought they were the one, and then eventually they're no longer part of our lives. We can think in terms of, maybe a job we really enjoyed, or, even a vacation that we have, eventually it's going to come to an end. So that is just the nature of samsara. So then we have the bane of being dissatisfied. That means, no matter how much we accumulate, we are constantly yearning for more. I've seen this phrase, the hedonistic treadmill, you know? So like a hamster on a little treadmill in the cage, right? It keeps running, but never goes anywhere, right? Yes? So same like us. We feel, oh, I'm suffering because I'm in debt. But once I pay off my debt, then I'll be okay. So we work hard, we save money, we, don't go out for coffee, right? Uh, and then we get out of debt. Great. Uh, but then it's like, oh, well, now I want to save for a new car. And then I want to save for a new house. And then I need to pay off my car. And then I need to pay off my mortgage and all this, right? So it never is enough. And we are constantly seeking more. That's why Nagarjuna, he once likens samsaric pleasures to drinking salt water. The more, we drink salt water, just the more thirsty we become. So similarly, the accumulation of samsaric pleasures is never enough. We just want more and more. And then also, we get used to that level um, of consumption, and then we'll just want more and more and more. I think I told the story um, of the chocolate in India. Yes. Anyway, uh, when I first arrived in India like 20 years ago, there's like Cadbury, and that was like the best you could do. And then they had all these like fake Cadbury. It has the same purple wrapper, but it's some Indian brand. And it's very, very cheap and it tasted like wax. Then, you got the Cadbury. I was like, okay, good enough. It'd be like like Hershey's in the US, right? Then sometimes people would come from abroad, and then the Europeans, they would bring Lindt, right? This like Swiss chocolate. Ooh, so nice. And then we would get, one of these big bars has maybe 8 or 10 squares. And so like there would be 8 monks in the house. And so we each get one little square of Lindt. So nice. Then the chocolate is gone and we go back to Cadbury. And it's like, you know? So I was actually saying this is a very good way if you want to maybe quit having chocolate, you go out and get the best chocolate you can find and you eat it. Okay. And then that's it. Right. Because like, okay, Lindt, it might be like, $6 or $7 for a bar, right? Then you're like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that every day. And now the Snickers doesn't look as good as it used to. So very nice way to quit chocolate. Okay. Anyway, that's the bane of being dissatisfied. Okay. Hmm. So and then the bane of repeatedly leaving bodies and being conceived and born over and over again. These are two sides of the same coin. So as long as we're in samsara and we don't achieve liberation, we'll have to die repeatedly and get reborn repeatedly. So yeah, might not seem that bad, but just remember, right? Once we're born, we're completely helpless. And we have to then learn, you know, uh, how to use a toilet, right? We have to be potty trained. We have to learn the alphabet. We have to learn how to speak. We have to learn how to tie our shoes, and then go through all those, what we say, growing pains, right? Um, and then we live our adult life, and then eventually that decline, as we approach our death, various aches and pains in the body, then our vitality diminishes. We start getting all kinds of wrinkles and gray hair. Um, then eventually we die. And so as long as we're in samsara, we're going to have to experience this again and again. There's one Tibetan Lama who said, it's it's uh, it's very good that the suffering of aging happens gradually. Because if we were to, let's say we were, 30, and then one day we wake up in the body of an 80-year-old, it would be like a great torture. So, okay. Then the bane of having to move from higher to low over and over again, that we see people even in high positions of power. Then there's some scandal. They have to, then fall into disrepute. And then the bane of having no companions, meaning, well, in general, so there's no misunderstanding. In general, in this life, we should be friendly and we should be, supportive and a good friend and confidant to the people in our lives, right? So this is more describing how sort of from life to life, we're born alone, we die alone, and there's no one that kind of goes with us from life to life. Okay. But for sure, in this life, it is good to have a support network, and it is good to have, nice friends that you can, share, grow, and heal with, you know? So then, okay, more suffering. We have the eight types of suffering. These are more associated with the human realm. So we have the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Okay. Then the suffering of encountering what is unpleasant. Okay. Separating from what is pleasant, the suffering of not getting what you want. So these we see um, again and again. And it's very good not to just leave this on the page, so to speak, but as we go through life, then just kind of mentally tally um, our experiences. And then now we can say, oh, I'm experiencing the suffering of encountering the unpleasant. Oh, I'm experiencing the suffering of separating from what is pleasant. Oh, like this. Um, and then even bringing this mindfulness on a day-to-day basis can really help counter that infatuation we have with samsara. We kind of forget the depths of which, the depths to which we experience these sufferings day to day. And this seventh one, the suffering of not getting what you want. I always like to add the suffering of not getting what you want, despite your best efforts, right? So we want a promotion at work, we work hard, we put in all the, extra hours and all that, but nonetheless, we get passed up for the promotion. We want someone to like us, right? And we're so kind. We get them flowers, when they come over to our place. We like clean up before they come, all this stuff. Uh, then they're still not that into us. So like that. That is just the nature of samsara. And remember, samsara being the cycle of existence due to karma and afflictions. So uh, we are totally subject to karma, which means, the great Tibetan teacher Zongsa Khenchen Rinpoche has this very nice image of like a leaf being blown in the wind, right? So we're like that, you know. We have very little control about what happens to us, and that itself uh, sort of is the root of our experience, this uncontrolled experience. And since we don't have control, then we're going to experience all of these kind of suffering, unpleasant situations. Okay. And that leads into the suffering of the five appropriated aggregates. So this is some terminology for you that's your Tibetan lesson. Zakche Nyelen ki pungpo, Zakche contaminated. Nyelen is what they uh, uh, translate as appropriated, right? So nyer like means to bring close. Len is to like take, right? Or receive. So here, hold on. First, we have to understand the aggregates. Those are the psychophysical constituents of a person. There are five: the form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. Okay. Basically, we can think that they're the body and the mind. Okay. Now, they're appropriated in the sense that when we are born, right, in samsara due to our karma and afflictions, we take on these aggregates. We take on this body, right? And why are they suffering? Well, on a very basic level, all the sufferings I receive in this human existence of mine are at the root of it, it's because I've taken on this human body, right? So, yes, I suffer because I get hungry, for example, right? But why do I get hungry? It's not just that I don't have food. Essentially, it's because I have this kind of body that needs food, right? Why do I get sick? Well, I have this type of body that's able to get sick, right? Hmm? Okay. So then also with this kind of body and mind, since I still have afflictions, here, the five contemplations, vessels for future suffering means I am, because I have afflictions in my mind now, I am accumulating negative karma, which will then ripen as future suffering. Okay. Then the suffering based on what presently exists, that means, well, I presently have this body, right? And uh, so this body presently exists, and therefore I'm hungry. Hmm? And then the vessels of suffering of pain, change, and conditionality. Well, those are the ones we had talked about. Um, I have pain because I have this kind of body that is able to experience pain. Um, I experience the suffering of change, uh, and that is, for example, when I eat momos, right, or something. Then the first one, very nice. Then hmm, what is the sweet spot for momos? I can eat tw maybe 12 quite comfortably, which is good because normally when you order momos at a restaurant here in Kathmandu, they'll give you 10. So it's quite nice. If I just have a plate of momo, it'll be okay. But it usually doesn't happen that way. Usually, um, well, you have the other things too. And then the momos would be like a starter. So then end up eating like, if you're sharing with a friend, you'll eat five momos, okay? But then you'll have a whole other, dishes. Mm. Okay, sorry for all the talk about food. Mm. Don't worry, I haven't had my breakfast yet either. Those of you who are in other time zones, maybe you've had your dinner, right? Those of you no? You eat your dinner after this? Wow. So then we're in the same boat. We have the suffering of hunger. Okay. All right. So yeah. So then summarizing, we have the suffering of pain, the suffering of change, and the suffering of conditionality are all pervasive compounded suffering. And so it is this last one that is the fundamental suffering that uh, 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 gaining a wish to be free from that is the unique feature of Buddhist practitioners. Okay. So what does this mean? Okay. In the last teaching that I had given here through Tibetan Buddhism on the illusion of the I, the illusion of the self, then there is this very nice quotation from, oh man, was it the seventh Dalai Lama? I'm not sure. Anyway, it was then referring, it was Pension Losang Chugi Gyaltsen, the first Pension Lama. And in that text, he said how even animals have a desire to be free from the suffering of pain, right? when you like kick a dog, it'll run away and yelp, right? Then the suffering of change means, the suffering of coming from eating, even the first momo actually is the suffering of change. And so because the pleasurable experiences that come from the external sources like momos or nice music or virgin pina coladas or whatever, since they are kind of dependent on meeting with those pleasurable objects, then, well, that itself is a drawback of them, right? And in general, Asanga talks about how the um, yeah, one of the main kind of drawbacks of the pleasurable experiences within samsara is that they necessitate having these external objects. And getting those external objects, well, it requires a lot of effort. We might not always have access to them. And then, we go to watch a nice sunset and then it's a cloudy day. So we're not in control of those things that we experience. So even that is kind of uh, a drawback under the suffering of change. So then there will be yogis in of course, Buddhist tradition, but also in the Hindu tradition that wish to be free from the suffering of change. And therefore, instead of chasing those samsaric pleasures out there, they'll engage in meditation. And through gaining, these kind of highly concentrated states of meditation, they'll experience a lot of bliss that is not then dependent on external factors, just kind of, dependent on their own kind of meditative stabilization and concentration. So, but this last one, the suffering of conditionality or all-pervasive commanded suffering, that is essentially because we have the ignorance that grasps onto the false view of the self, right? And so it is only the Buddha in the Four Noble Truths who identifies the truth of the cause of suffering as being fundamentally rooted in the false sense of the I, right? So for Buddhists, we have the concept of an atman, no self. Yes? Okay. But in other traditions, like in the Hindu tradition, they believe in the Atman, and then like realizing the Atman is the way to liberation, right? So anyway, for the Buddhists, realizing an Atman, right? The no self, that is the way for liberation. Okay? Okay. So then that was the truth of suffering. Okay. Now we have the truth of the cause of suffering. So we had said that the samsara is the cycle of rebirth due to our karma and afflictions, and therefore we have to understand what the afflictions are. So here, Arya Sangha says that an affliction is defined as a phenomenon that, when it arises, is disturbing in character, and that through arising disturbs the mind stream. So sometimes you'll see this Tibetan word nyongmong. The Sanskrit is klesha. In Pali language, I think it's kalis. Okay. Anyway, you'll see that translated as affliction, disturbing emotion, afflictive emotion, delusion. Okay. It's all pointing to the same thing, meaning, well, we have the three root poisons: attachment, anger, ignorance. When they arise in the mind stream, it disturbs the mind, right? When we have strong attachment to something, that craving and desire to get that thing then is very unpeaceful even in that moment, you know. And it is almost like until we get that thing, there'll be that kind of turbulence in the mind. Hmm? Hmm. Same anger, even easier to see how that is unpleasant in the moment. Um, and then, well, ignorance, hmm, well, that is what is then the root of the other two. Do I have this next? Okay, right. So there's this very important quotation. So once there is the self, then there's the idea of the other. Okay. Then on behalf of self and other, there's attachment and hostility. So those that we see are helping the self, we get attached to. Those that we see harming the self, we have hostility and anger to. Okay. And then all of the other faults come about in association with these. So, okay. Well, we're pretty much on time, so I'm gonna share a story. It's been a lot of lists, so we have to balance it out with some story time, okay? So those of you who came to my last course uh, would have heard this before, but I think it's such a good story to illustrate how this sense of the I is at the root of all of our afflictions, okay? So one time when I was visiting the US, yes, um, I went grocery shopping with a friend of mine, and this friend had bought a new black shiny BMW. Okay. And as we're coming out of the grocery store, the shopping carts, we hear one, you know, and yeah, we just hear it crash. And my friend says, oh, sucks for that guy. Okay. Then, as we continue to go, we then discover it was his car that got scratched. Okay. Then his whole demeanor completely changed. Where is that? And started yelling and started to, trying to find that guy and all this, right? All right. So you see, uh, wanted to, find him and cause physical harm, right? All right. So we can see the two. The first reaction, okay, when it is a car getting scratched, when it's a car getting, dented, oh, sucks for that guy, right? When it's my car, then the reaction is turbocharged, right? So think about it. Think about this, you know? Um, I also, we have to see this in play in our own lives. I think also in the other teaching I mentioned, when we're watching a sporting game, right? Right? Let's say, so many Americans here on the call, right? So, we're not that good with soccer, right? In general, right? But in many other parts of the world, they call it football. And the World Cup is so like important. And so I used to live with someone from Brazil and someone from Argentina, two very good teams, right? And so when they play each other, right, you can imagine uh, when one team loses, they're so dejected. It's like a big tragedy. They're crying when their team loses. And then the other one, it's like there's a party in the streets, you know? There's a parade, confetti, people like, if they're watching the game in some kind of sports bar, they'll like kiss strangers and like buy drinks for the whole bar, all this stuff, right? Okay. Now, for me, as a like impartial observer, I did watch the World Cup last time. And I'm watching it and I was like, oh, that's a good game, right? You understand? So that's the difference. Oh, that's a good game versus the person who loses, their team loses. Oh my God. Then the person who wins. Oh, yeah. You understand? So that is what Dharmakirti is talking about here. Oops. Okay. Once there's the idea of self, then there's the idea of other. Then on behalf of self and other, there's attachment and hostility. Okay. All the other faults come about in association with these. So let us then we have to understand the faults of the afflictions. When affliction arises, this is from Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo. So here, when affliction arises, at first it completely afflicts the mind, okay? Causing you to err with regard to what you're observing. So this is very important. The afflictions, okay, how they're going to work, this causing you to err with regard to what you're observing. So what normally happens is those things we have attachment to, there's an exaggeration of the good qualities. And those things we have aversion to, we have an exaggeration of the bad qualities, right? So whether it is, oh, you're the most beautiful woman in the whole world, or like you are the devil incarnate, right? For someone we're angry at, then we tend to have this, only seeing the bad aspects of something that we're going to get angry towards, and only seeing the good aspects of something we have attachment for. Okay? All right. So now, reinforcing your latent proclivities. Okay, wow. Now, what that means, latent proclivities, these are now known as like the seeds or the imprints of the afflictions. But to put it into very practical terms, right, we are creatures of habit, right? So the more we do something, the easier it is to do that thing. So we, on a very fundamental level, we have a habit toward getting angry when we are, say, criticized or when we're in some kind of, uncomfortable situation, right? We also have a proclivity, a habit to have attachment to things that we find attractive. Okay, so the more then we have that affliction arise and we don't apply the antidote and we just kind of let it run wild, then the more susceptible we are to generating that affliction again in the future. You understand? Mhm. So that is then what causes the same affliction to recur, right? Because we have stronger seeds for that affliction, it'll cause that same affliction to recur. Okay. Then when the affliction arises, it'll harm us, it'll harm others, or both. Then it leads to misdeeds in this life, in future lives, or in both. It creates experiences of pain and anguish as well as suffering of birth and the like. It takes you far from nirvana, your virtue is destroyed, and your resources are depleted. Okay. So you can imagine, people with very heavy addiction, which is just a supercharged form of attachment. Then they'll spend all their money and resources trying to get that thing. Then in society, you feel apprehensive, joyless, and devoid of confidence, while your notoriety, uh, yeah, it means bad reputation, spreads in all directions. And excellent persons such as teachers and protectors will rebuke you. You die with regret. Your aims unfulfilled, and after death, you are born into a miserable realm. So, yeah, in general, if we're trying to kind of get rid of something or change in some way, change our behavior in some way, it's very good to understand the faults of that behavior. Um, so that's why, in the medical world, you'll see these articles sort of uh, you know, talking about the drawbacks of having, too high blood sugar, too high cholesterol, something like this. Then when we understand the drawbacks of that, then we'll be more motivated to change our behavior, change our diet, change our exercise patterns so that we can get our blood pressure or, blood sugar or cholesterol, whatever, under control. So that's why we have to really understand the various levels of the faults of the afflictions. Okay, so now moving along, by the way, we are on track to finish, okay? Okay, let's keep going. We should talk about some of the antidotes for those afflictions, okay? So now, for attachment, and actually, this first one, remaining like a piece of wood, I'm taking this from Shantideva. he has a whole section in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara where he basically says, he gives all these different scenarios, situations, and it says, when I feel a desire to praise myself, I will remain like a piece of wood. When I feel a desire to criticize someone else, I remain like a piece of wood. When and so he'll go through various scenarios. And then remaining like a piece of wood means basically not doing something with our body or our speech that will come to, later regret because it will harm others or ourselves, right? So in general, it is more difficult to subdue the mind than it is to subdue the body and speech. But it can be the case where even though we might have a strong affliction arising, we don't have to act on it, right? So a general kind of antidote in the moment when we have an affliction arise is to just remain like a piece of wood. And how we can do that, well, you know, as my second grade teacher would say, zip your lip and keep your hands to yourself, right? So at that time, we don't speak out. We don't do something with our hands to then harm someone else. Or even in the case of attachment, right? We might have attachment to chocolate, right? Even the Lindt chocolate, and we see it, but although we see it and we desire it, every time we see a piece of chocolate, we don't have to eat it, right? Yeah. Now, it is better, right? If we are having some difficulty with objects of attachment, then one very good kind of diet advice is then just not to have those junk food in our house, right? That's the best way. So yeah. Then otherwise, like you have the potato chips, the chocolate, the whatever in your house, then every time you'll have to have that kind of self-restraint. Then it's harder to do that, throughout the day. Mm. Anyway, remaining like a piece of wood. That will be a general kind of strategy we can apply to all the afflictions. Then remembering the impermanence of that object. Okay. So whatever it might be, let's say we have attachment to some kind of food. Well, then to understand that like Oprah used to say, right? A moment on the lips and eternity on the hips. Yeah. So you eat that bag of potato chips. Oh, it's so nice. But, it's just a moment of pleasure. Meanwhile, you've just eaten all those calories, all that fat, all the salt, blah, 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 blah. And then it's very hard then to, sort of work it off and, you know, deal with the consequences. So many of you know, our experiences of attachment are like that, right? There is some kind of momentary pleasure, but then the consequences can be far-reaching, when we say, I don't know, cheat on our partner, or even any kind of negative action that we do, um, we are then accumulating the karma that then will ripen as suffering in the future. Okay. So then the other aspect of remembering the impermanence of the object is to then think, okay, let's say relative to a person, you know, sometimes we have this, attachment is exaggerating the good qualities of an object. So we think, oh, we'll live happily ever after, you know, well, hmm, happily ever after. What does that even mean? So eventually, you know, even even in those relationships, I hate to be, the bearer of bad news, right? But even in the relationship, either you're going to die first, the other person is going to die first, or maybe, you know, you'll get into a car accident and die sort of at the same time, right? So that there is no kind of happily ever after like they see in the movies. Um, so even this, it's not to then, rain on your parade. By all means, I want you to have, good and uh, well, good even is relative. So relative to samsara have, good relationships and so forth, but to have that reality check where it is not going to last forever. As the Buddha says, all meetings end in separation, you know, all meetings end in separation. So then, yeah, this ties into remembering death, um, and then getting a more realistic view of the object, seeing the impure as impure. So I like this example, you know, here in this part of the world, I mean, especially in India, there is a lot of emphasis placed on, a woman having like nice hair, shiny hair, thick hair. So when you go in the cities, a lot of the billboards will be, you know, advertising whatever kind of shampoo and conditioner. Okay. So it's kind of like that, right? Oh, such nice hair, such beautiful hair, you know? Then we imagine that hair in our soup. Hmm? Then, if you're living with someone and then eventually, right, every so often you clean out the shower drain, you find that hair. Hmm? So is it still looking so wonderful? Such beautiful hair, right? So this is again uh, to counteract the kind of projection and exaggeration. The Buddha said that, our main, um, we have four main distortions, and we perceive that which is actually impermanent in nature to be permanent, that which is impure we see as pure, that which is actually suffering in nature to be happiness, and that which is selfless to have a self. So, as much as we can counteract these wrong views that are coming again and again, then it'll be good for us. Okay. So next, antidotes for anger. Again, this remaining like a piece of wood, very good. It can be applied in across all of the afflictions. Then here, Shantideva, he mentions this in the patience chapter of Bodhisattva Charyavatara. But then also as an antidote for our anger, reflecting on the object and reflecting whether they have control. So this is very good, I think, when we first think of ourselves and those times when we harmed others, okay? And then, you know, unfortunately, I've been there so many times when I kind of got angry, I lost my cool, and then I said that thing or did that thing that I later came to regret. But in that moment, right, it was as if I had no other choice. The anger was just so out of control that I was like impelled to do that thing. I mean, even now, I've been training for quite a long time. Mm, maybe not so well, but I've been doing a little, right? And even some months ago, I had this situation. I was a little bit triggered. I was a bit angry, and then I had this desire to say something, and I'm like, no, don't say that, don't say that, don't say that, don't say that, and then bloop, it just blurts out because I didn't have enough like control, right? So then reflecting in relation to yourself, okay, you understand? Yes. In the heat of the moment, we say, right? In the heat of the moment, I just, I lost my cool, I lost my temper, I lost control. Then you can reflect the other person that's harmed you and similarly think that, oh, they also had, no control at that time when they harmed me. You know? And in that way, Chandrakirti says, it's not the fault of sentient beings, it's the fault of the afflictions, right? Then Shantideva also says, if we remember, or we imagine like getting hit by a stick, right? It's the stick that has actually harmed us, but we don't get mad at the stick. We get mad at the person wielding the stick, right? But taking a step back, we see that even that person is being wielded by their afflictions, right? So it's this kind of thought we have in the Christian, they say, uh, hate the sin, love the sinner, right? So the real sort of enemy in this case is the anger, is their attachment, is their jealousy. That is what propelled that person to harm us, right? And then that can help us, not get angry. This mind of anger, like wishing to harm back, wishing to retaliate, wishing for revenge, then, seeing that the object, the person that harmed us was out of control, then helps us to, uh, yeah, lessen the anger. Okay. Then, reflecting on the subject, that means us. So here is to understand that, our own mind plays a role in your suffering. So um, when we are criticized, Shantideva talks like, if someone shoots an arrow, if there's no target, then the arrow can't hit, right? So we, in some way, now I'm talking about relatively minor things, like if we're criticized, then it's like we have this kind of image of ourselves, right? As, let's say, attractive, smart, well liked, whatever, right? Then when someone calls that into question or someone insults us in those ways, then let's say the more attachment we have to our self-image of us being smart, then when someone calls us stupid, it'll affect us more. You understand? So this we have to understand how our own mind plays a role in the suffering, right? Um, Meaning these conception of the inflated ego, then that is what plays a role in the suffering. Okay. So second, then again reflecting on ourselves, Shantideva says, if we can't bear the suffering now, right? So let's say someone harmed us, and we want to retaliate because we somehow think if we retaliate, we'll teach them a lesson, and then that will make it less likely that they'll harm us in the future. Well, we've seen from karma that no, actually, all we're doing, well, one, harming them back doesn't then, undo the harm that we've received, right? And if we look at karma, we see that harming them back actually has just created the cause for us to suffer again in the future, right? So if we can't bear this present suffering, then it's all the more reason why we should refrain from harming them back, because that's just going to create the cause for future suffering. You see? And then when we combine this with like great compassion for all sentient beings to be free from suffering, right? We say that, right? May all beings be free from suffering. Now, even when we've been harmed, well, if we truly want that person to be free from suffering, then we can free them from the suffering they would experience if we retaliate, right? We can free them from that would-be suffering by remaining like a piece of wood and not harming them back. Okay? All right. Then ignorance. Um, mm, so I don't normally like advertise myself, but I'll advertise to the no relaying. This last series that we did on uncovering the illusion of the false I, it is just four sessions, and I think it was I was very satisfied with the amount we were able to cover about emptiness, and uncovering that illusion of the self. So you can look on it, look on the Tibetan Buddhism YouTube, and yeah, maybe listen to that again. So then we can understand how everything is like an illusion, right? How beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We understand this, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But at the time, we kind of project and we see the beauty established from the side of the object. And therefore, we want to possess, we want to own, we want to control those things we see as beautiful. And then on the flip side, the unattractiveness also is an eye of the beholder. But those things that we see as unattractive or bad or evil, we see it from the side of the object, and therefore we want to, destroy or have some kind of aversion or hostility toward, right? So then studying, reflecting, meditating on emptiness is going to be how we come to understand how uh, these qualities of beauty or unattractiveness aren't inherently established in the object, but they are just merely labeled by the mind. Okay. All right. So then that sums up the attitude of a person of medium capacity. The person of medium capacity, these persons are called medium who stop sinful actions. So yeah, they still do the practices of the initial capacity, turning away from negative karma. And then they turn their backs on the joys of psychic existence by seeing how, by reflecting on the suffering of samsara. And then they diligently strive just for their own peace. Okay. So now, here we are, person of great capacity. This very nice quotation from the Tibetan master Tokme Zangpo. He says, "From beginningless time, your mothers have cherished you. If they now suffer, what good is your own happiness? Therefore, in order to liberate the limitless numbers of sentient beings, cultivating bodhicitta is the practice of a bodhisattva." Okay? All right. So here, now we're going from the middle scope to the great scope, right? So one of the reflections is, okay, what good is your own happiness? This would be the individual liberation that is achieved as the goal of the middle scope. Okay. Now, what Tokme Zampo is having us reflect on is these other sentient beings have been our mother and have cherished us from beginningless time. So now, if they are suffering, then what good is our own happiness? Means, well, how could we feel just content and okay with just being liberated from samsara ourselves when these countless beings who have cherished us are still suffering? Okay. So therefore, we can't just be satisfied with our own happiness, but instead we have to liberate these limitless sentient beings. Hmm? And therefore, cultivating bodhicitta is a practice of bodhisattva. Hmm? Then Shantideva says, what need is there to say more? The childish work for their own benefit, the Buddhas work for the benefit of others. Just look at the difference between them. Okay. So here we now understand or need to understand this term self-cherishing. Okay. So hmm, we have a few minutes, so I'll share another story. Okay. So some of you know, some of you might not know, but I used to work and live in New York City. Okay. And believe it or not, I used to work in finance in New York City. Okay. And at that time, you know, because we were working late and because I was making decent money, and because I was a bit lazy, I would eat out all the time. Okay. Yeah. And not necessarily fancy places. There's a very nice pizza place around the corner, $2 slices. Okay. All right. but I ate out all the time. All right. And then one night, I did go to a little bit nicer place. And when I came out of the restaurant, there's a beggar there, and he was asking for money. And so I check my pockets. I say, "Sorry, I don't have any change." And he said, "Well, I take 20s." Mm. So this for me, very, very, very nice understanding of the self-cherishing mind. Okay. So I probably just spent maybe 30, $40 on dinner for myself. No problem, not thinking twice. Okay? No problem. Then when it comes time to practice charity in relation to someone who has, you know, much, much less than I, it is, oh, do I have change? Right? Do I have something? Basically, right? You know, what can you do with change? Right? You can't get a meal. You can't barely get a cup of coffee, right? But so when it comes to my own kind of well-being, very easily spending. Then when it comes to someone else, it is like I would only think to give something of such insignificant value that I wouldn't miss it, right? So at that time, I was earning enough. I could have given them all the money in my wallet. I could have done something that would then be the difference in their life, whether they could eat tonight or not. But it just shows, you know, the self-cherishing mind, what it means is although we are just one person and others are countless in number, if we're honest, right? Actually, the amount of effort, the amount of resources, the amount of energy we spend on ourselves far outweighs what we do for the countless sentient beings. And that's what the self-cherishing mind essentially is. We hold ourselves to be more important than all other beings put together. You know? Check. All right. So now let's see how that self-cherishing mind, how has that been working for us? Oops. Okay. So here, the childish work for their own benefit, Shantideva, the second stanza, while the Buddhas work for the benefit of others. Look at the difference between them. So here, what Shantideva is saying, okay, we have been operating under the self-cherishing thought for countless, beginningless time. And have we ever achieved our own benefit? No. All we've achieved is more samsara, suffering. The Buddhas, on the other hand, have flipped the script, right? And they only work for the benefit of others. And in a kind of paradoxical way, they're the ones who have achieved the benefit for both themselves because they've achieved enlightenment and for others, right? So that's why Shantideva also says, until we're able to truly exchange ourselves for others means to exchange our level of concern, whereas primarily we are totally concerned just with ourselves. With now exchanging that and being more concerned with others and others' happiness, then until we're able to truly exchange ourselves for others, enlightenment is not possible. And even within samsara, you'll find no peace. Understand? So this constant selfish, self-centered attitude, even in samsara, forget about enlightenment. Even in samsara, that's the one that makes us, suspicious of others, that makes us, like destroy our, relationships through, the selfish attitude. It has countless drawbacks and faults, even in this life. So then we come to recognize that the mind of self-importance, inflated self-importance, that's the real enemy. Okay? So anyway, we then have two ways of generating this mind of bodhicitta. And the first one, the 7-point cause and effect instructions. Well, before we generate bodhicitta, we have to level out the playing field. So that's why I have it as step 0. So normally we have these strong categories of friend, enemy, stranger. And so in order to level that out, we should reflect on it, uncertainty and impermanence, how even those categories are constantly changing. Our best friends now, at one point, were strangers. Maybe someone who is like, you know, let's say a romantic partner, we thought we couldn't live without them. Then we have some falling out, we break up, and they're no longer in our lives, right? So all these categories, friend, enemy, stranger, are constantly in flux. Therefore, to whom should we be attached, and to whom should we have aversion towards? There's also many times maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding, a falling out, and then later you can come sit down, kind of iron out your differences, and then be harmonious again. It happens. Okay. So that's the first way to have equanimity. The second one is just this reflection that all beings want to have happiness and don't want suffering. That's it. Actually, it says in the text, just that reflection for those who are intelligent, then that's all they need. And then all the rest of these trainings on bodhicitta will come very naturally, right? So there's a kind of a little thought experiment given in the traditional text saying, if you were imagining, okay, there are 10 people who were hungry, right? 10 beggars in front of you, and you had 10 meals, what way could you justify only giving to some and not to others? There'd be no way, because they're all equally hungry, right? So similarly, all beings are equal in wanting happiness and don't wanting suffering. Therefore, how can we say, oh, I'm only going to work for some and not for others? Okay. All right. Then we have the 7 points. Okay. So recognizing all beings have been your mother. Okay. This is tying into the fact that in Buddhist cosmology, there's been countless past lives. So just as we had a mother in this life, okay, then in our past life, our previous life we had one, the life before that we had one, and so forth. So then extending back from beginningless time, we then come to see that all beings at one time have been our mother. Now, it should be noted that this is the traditional formulation where for most, fortunately, it is easiest to see the kindness of the mother. But if you, for example, were raised by someone else, uh, or if you had some kind of difficult experience with your mother, then you can kind of substitute out the person that was your primary caregiver in relation to whom it is easiest to see the kindness. You understand? Hmm. All right. Then remembering their kindness. So yes, of course, feeding you, clothing you, um, taking you to school, picking you up after soccer practice, all of these things that our mother, has done for us. Then, wishing to repay their kindness, uh, developing this thought of gratitude, having received all this kind of kindness. And then that leads into number 4, affectionate love, Yeong Jampa. It means, seeing them as sort of near, dear, and lovable. That means we care whether they're suffering or they are happy. It matters to us, right? Then we have number 5, compassion, the wish that they're free of suffering. Number 6, the extraordinary thought is not just, compassion, thinking, may all beings be free from suffering, but then going one step further and saying, I myself will free them from their suffering. Okay. So this is, yeah, a very important point. In general, there have been countless Buddhas that have appeared in the past. Okay. I mean, and even today, there's countless Buddhas in the world, right? But I normally during like a beginner course here in Kopan, I'll stop the share. I ask people, how many of their, let's say, their graduating class in high school, how many of them have met the Dalai Lama? No one, probably, right? How many of your graduating class has done like a 10-day meditation course? Probably no one, right? Okay. So now, these beings, your classmates, that means they don't have a karmic connection with the Dalai Lama, but they have a karmic connection with you. You understand? So if we remember in the Buddha's life story, those five companions he had that were practicing, not eating for several years, right? Those became his first disciples when he taught the Four Noble Truths for the first time. And that was because actually in a previous life, when the Buddha was still training on the path, he was a king, and there were some cannibalistic spirits that then were eating the people in his land. And he called them and said, "Hey, can you not eat my subjects? Instead, I'll give you my own blood." And through practicing the charity of his blood, he created that karmic connection with them. And then that meant that later he was able, those five were his first disciples, and he was able to liberate them. You understand? So now, those beings who are in your life don't have a connection with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They don't have a connection with Lama Zopa Rinpoche. They have a connection with you. And so now, fast forward, hopefully not too long, but that when you achieve enlightenment, you will also have your first teaching. And in your first teaching, there will be people who are liberated from samsara. You understand? So those, your future disciples are, as it were, waiting for you to become enlightened, right? So that's why we all need to take personal responsibility and not just say, oh yeah, the other Buddhas will do it. The Dalai Lama will do it. You know, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? That kind of thought. So this number six, this extraordinary aspiration, is then to go beyond just saying, uh, may all beings be free from suffering, but saying, I myself will free them from their suffering. Okay. Then, between that and the actual generation of bodhicitta, we then have to reflect, okay, I will free them from suffering, but wait a minute, I myself am not free from suffering. I myself still have afflictions, I still have all these faults. I can't really free them from their suffering, as I am now. But then we reflect, if I'm able to achieve the state of enlightenment, then I'll be able to work perfectly for their benefit and well-being. And therefore, that's what I'm going to do. That's the mind of bodhicitta. I will, that kind of wish or commitment, I will achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay? All right. Last, the other way of generating bodhicitta is the equalizing, exchanging self for others. So here we've already touched on it a bit. We reflect on the faults of cherishing oneself and the benefits of cherishing others. And then this Tonglen meditation you might have heard of. We visualize all beings in front of us, and then we imagine all their suffering collects as black smoke in their hearts. And then because we now, after the first two reflections, we think, no, I'm not gonna, have that inflated self-importance anymore. I'm going to make my main goal in life to benefit others. And then through this Tonglen, we visualize that we're breathing in all the suffering. And then then we breathe it in, it leaves the beings we were visualizing around us. We breathe it in, and it destroys the self-cherishing mind that's at our hearts. And then as we breathe out, we visualize giving all of our, our merit, our body, our possessions, everything that sentient beings need for their happiness, we give. Okay? And then we do this meditation. Okay? Then toward the end, we will have visualized or sort of imagine that all beings are free from their suffering. Okay? And we also visualize that they're now enlightened. And that should make us very happy, you know? now all beings are free from suffering and they're also achieved enlightenment. That's so wonderful. That's like our deepest aspiration we have in life. So at the end of the Tonglen, we have this sense of joy. But then after a little bit of time, we then reflect, oh, actually, it was just a visualization. And in fact, all sentient beings aren't free from their suffering. And then we should be quite saddened by that. But then we think, oh, wait a minute. If I am able to achieve the state of enlightenment, then I will be able to do sort of what I just visualized and, remove the suffering of beings and establish them in the state of enlightenment. And therefore, that leads to bodhicitta. You then make that commitment. I will achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, pretty good. 2 minutes over, and we did get through the medium and great scopes. So thank you. I know it's maybe a little bit turbo, like my friend's BMW, but maybe yeah. If there's a question.
I do. It's pretty simple, actually. When I've been thinking about the concept of recognizing or just thinking about all beings have having been my mother at some point in time, would that then be under the assumption that beings are, well, finite in numbers?
Okay, so oops, my internet's going to cut out. Am I still on? Okay, it might cut out, but yeah. So here's the deal. This is a very interesting question. In the King of Prayers, it says, limitless is the end of space, thus limitless are sentient beings, thus limitless are karma and afflictions. May my aspirations reach be limitless as well. Okay? So in general, they say sentient beings are countless. Okay? Now, all right. You'll also see this. In the Sangata Sutra, there's a bodhisattva who approaches the Buddha and says, I have a doubt. The Buddha has been liberating sentient beings day and night from samsara, yet I don't perceive the kind of number of sentient beings decreasing, right? Okay. So, in general, here's the answer, what they say. Sentient beings are countless, but even in terms of different infinities, you can kind of look this up, right? So in general, the counting numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's infinite. Okay, right?
Right.
Countless, both ways. But there's I forget the name of this mathematical kind of theory, or and there's even a proof about it. But then, the numbers between, say, 0 and 1, right? You can go like 0.5, and then you can have 0.51, 0.0, sorry, 0.501, like this. So in general, there's a proof. The amount of numbers between 0 and 1 is actually an order of infinity higher than all the counting numbers. Anyway, sorry, we're getting too deep. See, you should never say this is a simple question. Never say that. So how it ends up being is, although beings are countless in number, because of this element of beginningless time, not only, although beings are countless, but they've not only been our mother just once, but they've been our mother numberless times. Okay. And then as we do this meditation, we then think, okay, even our father of this life has been our mother numberless times. You know, even our cat has been our mother numberless times. Even the person that, our barista that made our coffee this morning has been our mother numberless times, like this. Okay. So sentient beings are not, we can't say they're finite because of these other things. Limitless is the end of space, thus limitless are sentient beings. Okay. Then we get into a very difficult thought. Is there ever going to be a time when all sentient beings are liberated? Right? So the
That's
Buddha is liberating sentient beings day and night. Okay. This Bodhisattva didn't see the number of sentient beings decreasing, but it's kind of hard to wrap our heads around, right? So even within the Gelugpa monasteries, there's a lot of debate about this. In general, Sarah J, the monastery I studied at, they said, well, there will be a quote unquote end of samsara. You know, because all beings have Buddha nature, all beings have the potential to become enlightened, and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are working to liberate them. They're giving teachings, right? So, you can think, yeah, there's countless beings who've been liberated today. There's countless beings who've been enlightened in the past, and every day that goes on, there's more and more and more. So, at some point, sentient beings will be, totally liberated, and samsara will be empty. But even within the Gelugpa, Drepung Loseling Monastery, they say, yeah, they don't make that. They're kind of agnostic. They don't say it won't happen, but they also don't say it will happen. Okay. How my own, precious teacher, kind of the advice he gave when we were studying this in the study program, he said, you know what? It doesn't really matter. What matters is your samsara can come to an end. Not samsara in general. Don't worry about that. Your samsara can come to an end. You have Buddha nature. So you should work for liberating yourself, for enlightening yourself. And then when you're enlightened, you will then sort of spontaneously do everything and manifest countless emanations to liberate sentient beings. And you'll do that for eternity. Then one day, if sentient beings run out and you have no one else to liberate, then okay. You understand?
Yep,
So
that
actually,
was really helpful.
okay. Actually, there's very famously 14 questions that the Buddha didn't answer. And some of these questions were like, does does the universe have a beginning? Does it have an end? Da, 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 da. Does samsara have a beginning and end? So it is quite tricky, and but point is, your samsara can end. So please put an end to your samsara. Okay. All right. So now we have two more sessions. We have now covered the kind of traditional presentation of Lamrim. That is great. So now in our next two sessions, thank you for your patience. Maybe some of you are expecting more of these contemporary issues I've alluded to come in earlier, but we need to set up the groundwork. Now with that groundwork, we can now use these concepts we've talked about in the past 3 weeks in relation to our contemporary issues. Okay? So we'll see you next week. Thank you for your kindness and continued efforts. And yeah, be well. Take care. See you soon.